Hello, my name is Arthur, and in this video we're going to do a little bit on explosions. And because I'm not an expert at making explosions, we'll kind of do a focus on things that ran into as troubles and some of the solutions. So kind of what worked to get them working rather than how to make explosions that are beautiful. Because I don't really make explosions that are beautiful, I'm just learning how to do it myself. So we'll just have a look here. What I've got is I've added in a vehicle explosion. We've done the turret blast already, but I've added in a turret blast. And I've made a shell blast as well. So he has a shell blast. We're going to try to make a problem happen here. So we have a problem with the turret, and the turret is going on to weird angles. And we'll try to get it to do that again so we can see it a little bit better. Let's cancel that and get him coming back here. Try to get down where we can see it better before he dies. So we'll kind of get him coming this way and then move him up the hill, and we'll see his turret comes up at a weird angle. Oh, I still didn't get it to replicate. And that's just not going to work from that position. Let's move him away and bring him over, because he's just about to die. So we'll try to do this in a way that we can see the explosion happen and try to get the weird turret thing to happen. And that's not going to get it to happen. Sometimes it takes a while to replicate an issue. So we'll try getting them going there and then turn them up this way. Yeah, I'm having difficulties getting the turret action to happen. But when the turret is facing away, it's going to pop up in the air. And it needs to be constrained on it when it can focus on X. So there's the explosion. And we've seen all the other stuff. We have a shell blast happening when it hits the tank, and a muzzle flash. And we've already done a muzzle flash video, so there's not a lot to say about that. It's pretty much the same thing as I did in the last video. I'm just kind of playing around with settings and the images that I'm using. Now, there was some issues getting the shell blast to work, and what I discovered was with the shell only being an area, the shell blast was not happening until the shell was clear through the vehicle. So that happened on either side of the shooting. And the solution was to get the shell back into being a physical thing. So now the shell hits the collision shape, and that stops it, so it doesn't have the velocity that I guess it's just a slower signal on area entered that's causing it to not appear where it was supposed to. Now, with the physical body added to the shell, what happened was the crate started flying across the room. So I extended the area on it, but apparently the collision was overriding the area entered, body entered signal, so the crate wouldn't explode. And the solution to that was to take the crate and turn it into a static body rather than a rigid body. And really, it doesn't make any difference to have it as a rigid body. It's not like the tanks are going to come and push it under the Christmas tree to open later or anything like that. They shoot it, they don't move it. So I just made it a static body. And I don't know if any of the shell blasts showed it, but a shell blast will now explode on contact with the hill, the wall, and the ground. And they won't just pass through them, and they'll bounce off of trees. They don't explode on trees, they'll bounce off of them and then explode when they hit the ground. So on the tank explosion, there's not a lot to explain there. There's probably better tutorials than I can do on explosions. There's the fireball, the bits that come flying out, and then the smoke. Really, the only difference here is the ones that come flying out have velocity and gravity, where the other two don't. And the fireballs that shoot out, they use a copy of the same image that's used by the smoke and the fireball, except it's I doubled the layers so it has half the transparency, so it's more there. Because the fireball and the smoke, they don't have the velocity, they do a lot of overlapping, so their existence is largely comes from the overlapping over top of each other, whereas the fireballs are kind of flying off as lonely little entities. So they have to have a little less transparency to show up a little bit better. Then on the fire and smoke explosions, a lot of how that works has to do with the scale curve and the gradient curve. I know it doesn't look like a curve, but for its ease in and its ease out on in the area of transparency, it's kind of a curve like this. So it has a short duration to becoming a solid color, and then a longer duration to becoming a transparent color again. So it's that. On the smoke, it has the opposite curve, so it takes longer to ease in, and its ease out is shorter. So on the scale curve, it does the same thing. Its curve is more on this side. That kind of creates the cause and effect. The fireball causes the smoke. So the fireball comes in and goes out, where the smoke comes in and goes out. And hopefully that visual explanation explains it. The same thing with its gradient. The smoke gradient is the opposite of this, and it's just two grays. Like it's a darker gray and a lighter gray, and the transparency curve is reversed, just like the scale curve is reversed, and that creates the cause and effect. So that's about the most of explanation. When it comes to the images, I'm still experimenting with that in GIMP. So like this is one of the images, this is the other image. This is the image for the fire and smoke. This is the image for the fireballs. And then this is the image for the shell blast and the turret, the muzzle flash. So just experimental issues, and there's nothing I could really say that is beyond experiment, and some results will come out of it. And the more that I experiment, the more better my results become. So on the shell, yeah, its collision shape was enabled. So its collision is happening in layer 1. Everything else, the map, the hill, the wall, was added to layer 2. And it was added to layer 2 because this is the way that I sorted the mask for exploding the shell on the area. So it's not picking itself up existing in layer 1 where everything exists. It will pick up It will pick up environmental things in layer 2, and it will pick up the player or the enemy in layer 6 or layer 16, depending on whether it's a player shell or an enemy shell, because enemies are in layer 6 and player is in layer 16. So the shells reflect that. Its physical existence is there. It's looking to explode in layer 2 and layer 16, because this is the enemy shell and that's where the player exists. And the same thing still with the detect areas. The detect areas scan only for the enemy's lair or only for the player's lair. For script, there's the explode scripts are basically turn them on. So on ready, they're spawned, they're instanced in the world. So they're instanced by the map, by the root node. And the shell, same thing. It just turns on its emitter. And of course the turret blast is handled by the turret. So it does that. It does that shoot, wherever shoot is. It does the muzzle flash. Yeah, there's the issue with the turret, and that is an issue here where X needs to be constrained. So yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. We'll go over to world where the explode happens. So when a unit dies, it calls its explode and sends its body, and it uses the same sorting mechanism as I used in the menu to find the icon for the selected unit. So I gave the shell a group with the same naming convention, so that when it sorts, it's the first index in the group. So whether it's the shell or a tank exploding, it's just going to make the explosion equal the preloaded scene. So we'll have references to the preloaded scene for the different kinds of explosions, and it's entirely possible the one explosion for the tank will turn out to be multi-purpose and be usable by just about anything, just at different scales. So yeah, we might add in a scale here. So as it's sorting, if it's a smaller unit, it would use the main explosion and set a scale. So scale the explosion down smaller or larger depending on what's exploding. So yeah, the explosions are spawned by the world because it's the most practical place to do it. Yeah, I've had enough fighting with trying to make an explosion as a component of the unit itself, because it presents too many problems and it becomes very obvious with a shell. A shell spawning its own explosion would be an explosion still carrying the velocity of the shell. With vehicles, it's not only velocity, it's collision shapes, it's turn off the visibility of this, that, the other thing, and there's not a lot of need to do that. Why do that? Trigger the explosion and then have the unit queue free, and the explosion can be spawned somewhere else while the unit just ceases to exist. It's just easier that way. So I think that's all of the issues. Yeah, the other one was the crate. The crate needed to be turned into a static body, so really that's just changing what it extends in its script, and other than that there's no difference. It doesn't make any noticeable or practical difference in in the script, in the gameplay, because a crate has never been moved as a rigid body. So let's see, we're at 15 minutes. We'll just end this video. In the next video, we'll look at a fixed gun position. And because that will use the turret script, we'll fix the turret script problem, and I'll try to figure out how to replicate the problem so we can see what it is, because I had difficulty showing that. So I'll figure out a reliable way to get that turret to do its stick up in the air at an odd angle thing, and that way we'll see the need for fixing this part of the script. And it does have issues anyways. This statement here is kind of nonsense. It should simply read, if ABS direction is greater than 1. And yeah, that's one of the consequences of writing while I'm trying to do a video, because I don't realize that I'm doing things a hard way, when in another place I realized that I only need to check the ABS version. I don't need to check for the opposite negative version when I do it this way. So yeah, we'll fix this in the next video and look at a fixed gun position. And until then, I hope this was useful, and take care.